Welcome to Sounds, the podcast where we dive deep into the worlds of film, music, and culture, and some of the most compelling voices in the industry. I'm your host, Tom Needham, and today we have a fascinating conversation lined up. We're exploring the life and legacy of one of comedy's most amazing figures, Andy Kaufman. Through his boundary pushing performances, Kaufman constantly blurred the line between reality and performance, leaving audiences questioning what was real and what was part of his act. Now, thanks to a never before seen archival footage and also firsthand accounts from those who knew him best, filmmaker Alex Braverman has crafted a documentary that delves deep into Kaufman's genius, his fearlessness, and his lasting impact on comedy and culture. Oh man, Andy Kaufman is one of my favorites, so I'm really excited to talk about this. Thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, so Alex, of course, there's been a lot written about Andy through the years, and also there's been a dramatic film made about him. Why a documentary at this point?
Yeah, so Man on the Moon is a great, incredible film, and it introduced Andy to so many people of my generation who didn't get a chance to see him, live on TV. But I do feel that a documentary, a definitive, well-made documentary allows for his work to be showcased in a way that I felt like it should be. And it also, in the case of the approach that we took, I also wanted to make sure that his performances were given the right amount of time on screen so that the audience could sort of approximate the feeling of tension or awkwardness or silence in some cases that Andy created on stage for his audiences. But he's just an artist that I really appreciate and wanted to make sure that he got his due. Not to say that I achieved that, but I hope I did, and that was the goal.
I think you absolutely did, and I like how you mentioned the awkwardness and the amount of time needed because one of the things that's really unique about Andy is his brand of humor, and awkwardness is definitely part of it. What did you exactly mean though by giving the acts the time needed in order for them to be fully understood?
Well, I think so much of what we know of Andy now, in popular culture, it often winds up sort of chopped down into clip format, which is not unique to Andy. It's how we consume a lot of entertainment. But on stage, he's someone that used the passage of time and used silence and discomfort as a tool to create a certain feeling in his audience. And a classic example would be, not that we did this in any sort of real time sense, but he would go up on stage and just read The Great Gatsby in its entirety,
Yeah.
or he would just classically, eat a bowl of ice cream, and that was the entire performance. But one of the clips that we did feature in the film, more or less in its entirety, a little bit cut down, but not by much, is his bombing routine, where he starts out as a comedian who's struggling to get laughs on stage, but then that slowly evolves and morphs into him crying, and then the crying becomes a rhythm, and then that rhythm becomes a conga drum song. And it's just, I feel like in order to understand how that must have felt, and in order to get the joke and have it be funny, you actually have to like sit with it and go on that journey. And it was just an instrument that he used.
And what did you learn that Andy himself got out of the experience of creating those awkward moments?
Well, I don't think that he was trying to, I don't think it was an act of cruelty in any way. I don't think that he was trying to upset the audience or something like that. I think he was just trying to get a genuine reaction. I think he was trying to take people out of their everyday like humdrum, distracted experience and just give them a little bit of a thrill. Um, but when you look across his entire body of work, whether it's, doing his version of stand up or performing music or wrestling or Tony Clifton, whatever it may be, like it was all of those different pieces of his body of work like have a similar effect on me, at least, which is to say they really demand and receive my full attention. So I think that's what he's going for, is getting your attention, getting a real reaction, taking you out of your life, giving you a little bit of a thrill.
I was totally blown away by the fact that he actually had worked at one point with Laurie Anderson. I'm a big Laurie Anderson fan, and I forgot that I had heard her piece that she had in a routine. But tell our listeners a little bit about what Andy and Laurie did and why that's perhaps maybe important for us to understand in terms of like those who question whether he was a performance artist or what exactly he was doing.
Sure. Well, I think he gets categorized as a comedian, uh, probably first and foremost. But I think of him. He described himself as a song and dance man. I think of him as an entertainer, since that's a very flexible word. But he, it would be fair to also call him a performance artist. He connected with Laurie Anderson at a time when both of them were still on the rise and up and coming. They were both downtown fixtures, and they basically would go to shows together, see music together. But she tells the story in the film about how she would also collaborate with him by being a plant at one of his shows. And so, she would start to heckle him and he would heckle her back, and then they would ultimately get in a wrestling match on stage. This is like the early origins of his wrestling routine that he later went on to, do on SNL and on tour across the country and in clubs as well. But yeah, when you think of him in that context, it's interesting to see that he is playing with our expectation as a what are we expecting to see when we go into a comedy club and see someone perform? And so the performance is really it's borrowing from elements of street theater and that tradition which Laurie is and was a part of.
One of the most fascinating things that you cover in the film, which some people have heard of, is that a lot of the stuff that he did in his routines, apparently, he would do in his own personal life with coworkers or even if he was just walking down the street. Um, can you explain a little bit about what you learned in terms of what he was doing in his own personal time sometimes in terms of doing some of these things that people have now, associated with his act, but yet he was doing some of these things in his own personal life.
I don't think that he needed an audience of more than one person in order to be excited to perform. I
Wow.
think as long as there was one person there, whether that be friend or coworker or a stranger on the street, I think he was ready to throw down. I mean, there's a story in the film that about how he would pull up to a red light with his girlfriend,
Mm.
and if there was someone in the next lane over in their car looking at him, he would pretend to strangle her, and then the light would turn green and they would just drive off. And but that delighted him. Bob Zamuda tells a story. It's not in the film, but he didn't make the final cut. But sometimes they would go to the zoo, and one of them would just start screaming, "Oh my God, the lion has escaped! Like everyone run!" And they would start running, and like there would be a whole rush toward the front of the zoo. And another great story that I love is that also not in the film, but Lynn Margulies lived, his girlfriend, in the later years of his life, she lived in San Francisco, and he would come up to San Francisco and stay with her. And she had a roommate that complained that Andy used too much toilet paper. And he, as a result, every single day would buy one roll of toilet paper and put it on the back of the toilet and just stack them on top of each other until there were just tons of rolls of toilet paper basically touching the ceiling, and just things like that where you're like, this would, it just never ended. I think he had a limitless appetite to entertain people.
You know a lot of people in the entertainment industry. Is this kind of behavior unique? This idea of just doing what one does every day, 24 hours a day, if that's what he was actually doing.
I think what's unique is the the fact that he never sort of paused and explained and revealed fully who he is. He had the ability to be himself in a way where people were still uncertain as to whether or not they were getting the true version of himself. There
Hmm.
are some interviews that I've seen of him where, as far as I can tell, he's being completely sincere and genuine, and yet still there's this spin on it where you're wondering, like, is this for real? Like, and so that is a talent and I guess a little, that's a quality that he has that sets him apart from many other types of performers who are pushing the boundaries at all times. I don't really want to name names or do comparisons because I think Andy was truly one of a kind. But when you see some performers that sort of get named in the same sentence as him, or are following in his footsteps, their act is incredible, but then you'll see them sort of giving an interview or whatever, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's the real person, 100%. Whereas with him, I think we can only ever be like 99% sure.
I find with documentary filmmakers that a lot of times the subjects that they're interested in or the stories within their documentaries that they end up telling, it's often somehow a reflection of themselves. Is there anything on a personal level for you in terms of your own being that you see that you've learned that you about yourself through making this film about Andy?
Interesting question. First time I've been asked this or anything like this. If anything, it's that his ability to totally fearlessly explore any avenue or interest or emotion that he has with such confidence. That's something that I wish that I had, and I'm drawn to people who can have that level of courage to just express any emotion that they're having at any given moment, or if they have the impulse to become a wrestler all of a sudden, that they'll just, the fact that he was able to do that is something that I'm not envious of the wrestling itself, but I'm envious of the courage that it took to take something on that he knew would torpedo his career. We have to be very careful, especially these days, as far as what we present of ourselves to the world. And the fact that he was unconcerned with anything like that makes him a subject that I want to spend as much time around as possible. It's very inspiring, if not dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. I think now, especially with everything that's going on, one of the things that's so incredible that you bring out in this film is that people liked different parts of Andy. Maybe they liked him on Taxi, or maybe they liked his comedy. But like today, people put themselves in certain, whether it's political camps or whatnot, and find it tougher than ever to like people that are different from them. And it's challenging for people today, and it's scary, as you said, for people to truly express themselves in ways that they know may upset their base. And
Mhm.
Andy, man, if he was alive today, I'm so curious what he would be doing because, I mean, like, I can't believe like the same guy was working with Laurie Anderson and wrestlers and
Yeah.
SNL and Taxi and sometimes like people would just be like, "What are you doing?" But he would still do it. And then can you talk about that a little bit? His willingness to go to different camps and different audiences, and it's just mind blowing.
Yeah. I mean, I think certain people got it and certain people didn't, or certain people liked or appreciated it and others didn't. And I feel like that was more the dividing line for him than any other factor. I mean, like even now, like, the film's coming out and we've gotten some some press. Um, and I'm just looking at some of the comments online of people reacting to Andy, and it's sort of the same in 2025 as it was in 1975 or 1980. It's like it's just one comment after the other that's like, he wasn't funny then and he's not funny now. And then the next comment will be like, he was ahead of his time and a total genius, and watching these clips are as fresh as ever. And that's kind of the end of the story. Like, I think it's either people enjoy being taken on this ride and wouldn't call it deceived, but really more like, presented an illusion that's revealed to them. That's either a total delight or people feel like very upset about it. And it's it's a trademark of his, you know what I mean?
Mm,
Whereas if we were to look at it today, of course it's impossible to know what he would be doing today or how he'd be received today. I truly believe that he would be equally loved and equally hated on both the left and the right.
right.
I think obviously the dividing line in our society these days is like liberal versus conservative, but I could sort of imagine both sides
Yeah.
embracing him and both sides rejecting him, depending on what kind of person it is.
And what he's doing at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
And the other thing that's so relevant today is this whole idea of how it's becoming less and less clear to a lot of people what's reality with deep fakes and just the way information is available to everyone on the internet, but people are reading different things, and it becomes tougher and tougher to know what is real and what's not. I mean,
Yeah.
he was dabbling in all that for years, um, so he probably would love this period and thrive in it. I would assume. Um, I wonder if you have come to any conclusions in terms of um, you address in the film that he had spent a period in his life when he was on drugs, and was living in a park, um, and he obviously lived an unconventional life, and even the people that knew him didn't always know him. Um, do you think that he was somebody that was fully in control of, I guess his? I don't want to phrase it wrong. I mean, was he struggling at all throughout his life with any kind of mental or health
Hmm.
issues, or was this just him doing what he wanted to do and he was fully in control?
I don't know, and I hesitate to
Yeah.
pretend to be any kind of voice on this, but what I'll say is that even if he was, you know, experiencing something that you could attach a diagnosis to, um, I still think he was pretty in control of how he was living his life. And I didn't ever hear anyone say, even though I heard plenty of people express behaviors that they found bizarre, I never heard anyone express with one exception, which I'll get to in a second, I never heard anyone express like he was acting X, Y, and Z, and I was worried about him. I heard what I heard instead was, you know, maybe that his behavior could be selfish at times,
Mm,
um, or not necessarily caring about if it was affecting someone else, which I guess is another way of saying selfish. But I never heard like he was so out of control and I was so absolutely worried, with this one exception, which is to say, when he became ill, uh, his approach to dealing with his illness was a more, holistic medicine, diet,
yeah.
uh, radiation, but not chemotherapy approach. And then, of course, famously traveling to the Philippines to visit with faith healers. Um, there were definitely people that were worried that that was, that he wasn't taking it seriously enough. But yeah, I wouldn't call him, dealing with mental illness issues or anything like that. Although there were people that we spoke to that talked about him having OCD.
Okay.
Um, but again, like that's not something that I verified, nor does it really qualify as being out of control. You know what I mean? If anything, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
OCD is about creating control.
Right. Well, I know we don't have too much more time. I absolutely love this film. I do have to ask you though, the meditation, his
Mhm.
spiritual journey. When you look back at his life, um, and try to put that part in in within everything else that he did, what kind of conclusions do you come to in terms of who he was spiritually?
Yeah. Well,
I know it's hard, but
yeah, yeah. I know that this period of time that you referenced, where he was a teenager or in his early 20s, late teens, taking a lot of drugs and sleeping in parks and everything. I know that he found meditation soon after that. That or meditation is what ultimately brought him out of that, because I believe that TM asks that you stay clean for a few weeks before you even start the process of learning it. And according to everyone that knew him and was close to him, once he began his practice of twice daily meditation, I don't think he ever missed a day. And so I can't really speak to what his spiritual life was, his inner life, but I can just say that he took it beyond seriously, and it was a place for him to reconnect with himself and perhaps find creativity as well. But it was in his rider. He needed a place to meditate, regardless of where he was performing. I think it was on in his contract at Taxi that that was something he was going to be doing twice a day, and so it was a real practice and a real need and connection that gave him something that I wouldn't be able to explain, but something very meaningful to him.
well, you did a fantastic job bringing out all the different aspects of this amazing man's life. It makes me want to go back and watch his stuff even more. I wasn't a diehard fan, but the film made me more interested in his work. So I thank you for that. And if people want to learn more about the movie, can you direct them online to different places to look it up?
Well, as of today, it's available for rent or purchase on all of the normal VOD platforms like Amazon, Apple TV Plus, I think Google Play. I'm not sure what the others are, but anywhere that you would normally rent or buy a movie, right now it's available. It's live, it's streaming already. And then depending on where people live, it's also in theaters as of today. And there's a website where you can go to called thankyouverymuch.drafthousefilms.com that sort of spells out every single theater it's playing in from now until mid-April or May. And of course, there are links there for people to rent or buy the film as well. And that's once again, drafthousefilms.com/thank you very much.
Well, Alex, thank you very much.
No, thank you very much.
All right, take it easy. Bye bye.
Bye.